Welcome to Pushing the Limits, the show that helps you reach your full potential, with your host, Lisa Tamati, brought to you by lisatamati.com.
Welcome back to Pushing the Limits. This week I have Dr. Elena Seranova. She is a molecular biologist and she's also the founder of NMM Bio. And this is a company that I've been working with for the last year and a half and importing her products. And this is all about longevity and anti-aging. And so Dr. Elena has been on the podcast a couple of times and we go deep into the longevity science. And today we're going to go even deeper. So, stay with us, folks, for this one. It's gets a little bit complicated, but if you want to know how to live longer, live healthier, how to reverse aging, how to slow down aging, then you need to listen to this episode with Dr. Elena. It's really, really interesting. Welcome back to the show, Elena. Fantastic to have you.
Yes, happy to be here as well. Really excited.
Yeah, me too, because I want to dive into today quite a lot of the new stuff that you're doing. And we're going to be talking about a product called TMG. We're going to get into that, Trimethylglycine, and how it works with what we have currently in our longevity shop, NMN. So we'll just dive on in. Can you give us a bit of an overview, Elena, on longevity and this space, the longevity science?
Yeah, sure. So there is a lot of interest in the field with regards to longevity and different kind of products that are related to longevity. And the reason for that is that I think that we keep on honing our understanding of what longevity is, what anti-aging is, what is the aging process, and how do we actually age. And we start understanding the causes of aging much better than we did, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago. And actually, there's been an excellent review that came out a few years ago that basically defined the 9 hallmarks of aging. And also recently, we had a 10th hallmark of aging being added, which is inflammation, basically. So the 9 hallmarks of aging have to do with things like, telomere attrition and loss of proteostasis, loss of basically the balance of proteins within the cell, epigenetic alterations, things like that. And there are basically multiple processes that are interconnected in the cell that are all declining or getting imbalanced during the aging process. And the good news is that over the past 20 years, we actually haven't discovered any new processes. So obviously inflammation was always there. It's just we recently classified it as another hallmark of aging because it's always there when an organism is aging. We can see this in all mammals, including humans, and we can see how this is becoming quite a big problem as we age, because it leads to different age-related diseases such as arthritis and so on. And actually, at this point, it's very important to say that the top 4 killer diseases today, which is cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and diabetes, have as their highest risk the age of the patient, basically. Yeah. So the older you are, the highest your risk of getting one of these diseases. So like if it's not going to be one of them, it's going to be the other one. So it's all downhill from there. And actually now we start realizing when does aging starts, which is actually at quite a young age, basically at the age of 25, because this is where our hormones peak. This is where the production of NAD peaks as well. NAD is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is a master regulator of human metabolism. So all of those things, and including our energy and focus, they all peak at the age of 25. And it's actually interesting. I met a lady the other day, and it was actually in the sauna at the gym. And we were talking about, what do you do? What do you do? Because the sauna is in our building. So we're basically neighbors. So we started chatting, and she asked me, okay, what do you do? And I said, well, I have an anti-aging supplement company. And then she said, oh, okay, so you sell supplements to people of old age. And I said, actually, no, I don't sell supplements only to people of old old age, I sell supplements to anyone over 25 because this is where the process of aging begins. And then she's like, oh, I'm 41 and I'm feeling tired all the time. And I'm like, well, here you go. You know, we've already started. And yeah, she ended up actually becoming a customer. So
it's a good way to get customers in the sauna.
80 degrees.
yeah. And actually sauna is one of those anti-aging things that I have in my regime, definitely.
Yes,
because it spikes your growth hormone, for example, and your BDNF, your brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So there's lots of lifestyle things that we can do, which we can talk about as well. But the really interesting area is these molecules that are starting to come out now that have been proven to start to reverse some of the causes of aging. One of these being NMN, which I'm importing from you and your company, and I was so stoked to find you because I'd been searching for this molecule for a long time before I met you, and I wanted a good quality. I knew of its efficacy from Dr. David Sinclair's work and the book Lifespan, which I highly recommend everybody read. And I was like, gotta get this stuff. Came across you, and we partnered up, and now have NMN down in New Zealand, nmnbio.nz, if you want to check that out. Can you explain what NMN is and why this is important? And we have covered this in a couple of our podcasts previously, but I just want to give a bit of a recap, basically.
Yeah, sure. So NMN stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide, and it's a vitamin B3 derivative, and it's basically a natural molecule that can be found in some small amounts in different foods like avocados and broccoli and tomatoes and so on. But in order to get an actually efficient dosage, you would need to supplement with it. So what it does is that it's a precursor to NAD, to the molecule that I previously mentioned as the master regulator of human metabolism. And it converts into NAD within your cell in one simple step. So it's actually quite potent. It's highly bioavailable. And it's also water soluble as well. So really nice molecule, and no side effects practically. And there's been actually quite a few clinical trials ever since we spoke last, because we haven't recorded anything together for a couple of months. For a few months actually. So ever since, we had quite a few human clinical trials coming out and showing the efficacy of the compound. So basically, because it does boost the levels of your NAD serves as a fuel for your sirtuin proteins, which are basically responsible for different rejuvenation processes within the cell, including DNA repair, including mitochondrial production, and so on. And they're very, very vital for maintaining our cells healthy and to make sure that they don't lose their identity as well. So they know what to do, and they know, all the epigenetics within the cell work as well as possible. So all the genes that need to be expressed in certain cells are being expressed, and other genes are suppressed, and so on. So this is how you maintain cellular identity.
Can you explain that a little bit? So cellular identity, like people we have a DNA code that's in every single cell, and it's the same in every cell. The differences between a skin cell and a neuron is that certain parts of the genome are being read in this cell, and certain parts of the genome are being read in a neuron, for example. And as we age, these start to get confused and chaotic, and different parts of the genome are being read. Is that correct, the way I've explained that? And that's what's happening. And so these sirtuin genes stop that from happening, that X differentiation?
Yeah, sure. So basically what happens is that we do have our chromosomes, and we do have this DNA strands that are compacted in different ways. So you do have the chromatin that is either an active form that can be transcribed, that can be read by a gene and produce protein, or you can have basically some inactive parts of the DNA that cannot be transcribed, and you can't produce any proteins from this. So this is, there is the the heterochromatin and the euchromatin that you have. So this is the active form and the inactive form of the open and the actively transcribed euchromatin, and the closed and transcriptionally inactive heterochromatin. So basically, you have different kinds of accessibility of the genomic areas within the DNA, and this is altered via histone tail modifications, typically involving different chemical tags on the DNA. So this could be either an acetylation on a lysine residue and so on. So you do have those epigenetic modifications on the DNA that define which areas will be active and which areas will not be active. And this is what defines whether a cell would be expressing, for example, the neuronal genes, and then it becomes a neuron and so on. So we do have this process, and this is what sirtuins do as well, because sirtuins are basically genes that are involved with histone acetylation as well. So you have those different tags on the actual DNA that would define this process. So what happens there is that when we grow older, because you basically have the housekeeping genes of the sirtuins that would be making sure that the correct genes are staying switched on, and then you have the firefighting function of the sirtuins, which would be, let's say, if we have a break on a DNA strand somewhere on the chromosome, like the sirtuin would basically attend the site of the break, and then it would repair it. So there are multiple functions that sirtuins need to attend to within the cell, and with age, this function becomes less and less efficient, basically, because sirtuins become a bit forgetful, let's say. So let's say they move back and forth on the firefighting fronts, and then they might as well forget where is the place to do the housekeeping function as well. And then this is where the epigenetic regulation becomes a bit more loose, and this would eventually lead to genomic instability and to loss of cellular identity.
Wow.
So this is the kind of mechanism of aging that we have going on in the cells.
So I love that firefighting thing. So people imagine there's a big fire in Australia, and all the New Zealand firefighters are sent off to repair that. But while they're at home, their bills aren't being paid, and their mortgages are being paid, and they're not producing kids, and they're not doing all the stuff that they should be doing when they're at home. That's basically what you're saying. So they're off fighting the fire there and repairing DNA, but they're not doing, and then they get lost on the way home. They end up in a bar somewhere with some other person, okay? So then they don't find their way home. I think that's a really good, simple analogy of what we're talking about. And then they don't come home to pay the mortgage, and then then you lose your house. And that's basically you lose the house, meaning you're aging. I think that's a really good analogy. I love it.
Absolutely, I love it.
Because you've got to put it, it's pretty complicated science that we're talking about. So we need to put it into sort of pictures for people to understand, because you're immersed in this stuff. So for you it's just like, oh, of course, but for most people it's like, whoa. So histone deacetylation, can you just define what is that exactly? Is that the repairing process, or is that what is histone deacetylation?
Sure. So histone deacetylation has to do with the way that these genetic regions will either be in a compact form, or they're going to be in a loose form where the DNA can actually be transcribed. So it defines what will be the active areas and what will be the inactive areas. Okay. And the way it happens is by acetylation of these areas, which is basically like a chemical tag on top of the DNA.
Yeah, methyl group, isn't it? Yeah, one of the methyl groups.
Mm-hmm. We actually have quite a few processes that are functioning at an epigenetic level. So we do have the acetylation, we do have the methylation going on. So methylation is actually the addition of the methyl groups and so on. So there are a lot of things going on there. I'm not sure if this would be of interest for our audience, because this can actually become more complicated.
But if we step back and we go, okay, NAD is the fuel source that's needed for the sirtuin genes. The sirtuin genes and this enzyme or these proteins go out and put out the fires, repair DNA. They do all this housekeeping stuff that keeps the cell switched on in the right way. When they when our NAD levels start to deplete, which is what happens when we get older, that's when we don't do the DNA repair and we're not paying the mortgage and we're not, cleaning house, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's the interesting part. So as we age, the production of NAD is declining. So this means that there is less NAD available for sirtuins to use as their fuel to do their job.
Yep.
And not only that, but as we age, we also have increased DNA breaks, for example, and genome instability and other things going on. So actually, we need more NAD, but we produce less. So it's a vicious circle where we actually have less and less NAD, both because it's consumed more and because it's produced less. So this is, basically one of the underlying mechanisms of aging, where we're seeing that we do have the more genome instability. And then with that, we do have the loss of cellular identity. And actually, the more efficient, genome stability is, the less you're going to have senescent cells. So senescent cells are the zombie cells. So those two are inversely correlated. And the more senescent cells you have, the more genome instability you will have, because to the loss of cellular identity, which is what senescence is all about, when the cell basically forgets how to do its function well. So it even stops replicating and it becomes just a senescent cell that sits there and actually also induces different inflammatory signals as well. Yeah. And this is what drains NAD even more.
Oh, wow.
Now you have another player competing for NAD, which is CD38, which is an inflammatory cytokine produced by senescent cells. So now the CD38 is being secreted, and it also wants to produce it also wants to consume NAD. So you have this downward spiral of NAD consumption as you age. And this is what basically depletes other functions, because we now know that NAD is implicated in nearly 50% of enzymatic reactions in the cell. So it's a very, very important molecule. And if our cells of NAD would drop to zero, we
would be dead in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Yeah, exactly. It's that important. So that's really interesting. So as we age, we get more of these senescent cells, and I've talked about this on previous episodes with Dr. Youth as well. Senescent cells are like zombie cells that basically have stopped doing their function and stopped replicating, because usually our cells are replicating and producing new ones. But they are sending out these CD38 and these chemokines and cytokines that are inflammatory, that then infect, if you like, for the want of a better description, the cells next to them. And then the body starts to get the senescent load. So we have more and more senescent cells that are just hanging around. They should die. They should go away. And this is where senolytic activators come in. And so that there are, like quercetin, fisetin, what else is there? So I've got some mum on these, for example. I'm on these, quercetin, fisetin as well. And these, the reason we have those, this is very good, for someone like mum with cancer, is we're getting rid of and causing autophagy and apoptosis. And fasting does this as well, doesn't it? Intermittent fasting and longer fasts can actually cause autophagy, so that's self-eating and getting rid of these senescent cells. Can you explain autophagy a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So autophagy is the mechanism by which the cell is basically getting rid of toxins and things that are floating around and are not needed anymore. So those could be either dysfunctional mitochondria or aggregate-prone proteins, such as the ones that we're seeing in neurodegeneration, for example. In Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, we do have those proteins being accumulated in neurons and basically altering the function of the neuron. And what we're also seeing is we actually are seeing decreased autophagy in neurodegeneration, which is actually what I was working on during my PhD, which is very interesting. And I know I've been telling you this for quite some time, but my paper will be published very, very soon. So I'll be back with this.
Excellent. I can't wait to read it. That's great.
Yes. So this is what autophagy is, and it's a natural mechanism to make sure basically a protein housekeeping function for the cell, a protein homeostasis, and it can be triggered with fasting as well, because what happens is that when we start having a deficit of amino acids in the cell, then the cell says, okay, so there's not enough food around, so I need to kind of clean myself, because actually autophagy is a catabolic process. So this means that it does gather all of this garbage that is floating around in the cell, and then it's producing new building blocks for the cell. So this could be lipids, this could be amino acids, and then this could be utilized again to produce new proteins and so on. So it's a recycling process basically for the cell. And after 12 hours of fasting, you might start getting some autophagy in the liver, for example. And then after, let's say, 20 hours of fasting, you will be having some basic autophagy going on in other tissues as well. So, and that's the reason why I personally am doing intermittent fasting every day. So usually I consume food within a very narrow window during the day. And as I go, I keep on narrowing this window. So sometimes I'm even doing 1 meal a day. Sometimes I'm doing 2 meals a day, but they're like, let's say 3 hours apart. So I have one meal at 1 p.m. and I have another one at 4 p.m. and that's it. And then basically this gives me activation of AMPK, which is a pathway that is basically activated when there is no amino acids floating around. So I have this activated for 20 hours, 21 hours. And then between my meals, the other pathway is activated. So mTOR is activated. So mTOR is mammalian target of rapamycin, is also a very important cellular regulator, and it's sensitive to amino acids. So when you start consuming foods and when you start, when you're having a meal, it's basically the opposite of autophagy. So mTOR is a negative regulator of autophagy. And what it says is, it says, okay, so now we have an abundance of food, we have an abundance of amino acids, it's time to build. So let's build muscle. And this is why, it's good to go to the gym and then have a protein heavy meal, because then you can actually rebuild your muscle. This is what mTOR does. So if you're doing intermittent fasting, you will be having your mTOR activation for let's say 4 or 5 hours, because mTOR is basically staying active for another couple of hours after a meal. So actually, if I'm doing if I'm doing one meal at 1 p.m., I'm activating my mTOR, and then I'm having another meal at 4 p.m. And then the mTOR will stay active for another couple of hours. And then the AMPK will kick in again. And I can actually stimulate this process with some supplements as well. Yes. So for example, berberine, it is activating AMPK. It's an excellent supplement. It can also contribute to glucose metabolism. So it's basically acting like metformin, which is a drug for type 2 diabetes. And this is, I also supplement with berberine in the evenings after my last meal of the day. I would take berberine. I would take it with milk thistle. That actually would increase the absorption of berberine as well. So those always go together. Very nice.
Because I see, I'm on berberine. I'm also on metformin, and Mum's on that. And the reason that she's on that is to block that glycolysis pathway that feeds the tumors, right? And so this play between mTOR and AMPK. So just a quick recap. mTOR is when the body is in a growth phase, basically, and it's building, and we want that at certain times. But when we eat every 2-3 hours, like we're told to do, like eat 4 to 6 meals a day, then we're activating mTOR all the time, and we're not giving our body a chance to do the autophagy process. And so over time, autophagy is not happening. Senescent cells are loading up in the body, and we're not doing the clear out phase. It's like bringing food into the kitchen, but we're not taking the garbage out. And so we want those phases. And so to get this, we want to have fasting phases where maybe 14, 16 hours, whatever you can manage on a regular basis. And, under the guidance of a doctor, even longer fasting if you're, got a particular problem like cancer or something, you want to be doing that. It's very, very important. But it's also the AMPK, is stimulated by things like metformin, berberine, the milk thistle. I knew I had milk thistle on my supplement list, but I didn't understand the connection between that and berberine. So thank you for that. That's really good. So if you can't get metformin, which it's a good, relatively safe drug that is shown to cause people to live longer. So that's a really good thing. But berberine is a good natural supplement alternative for that. So we're doing this on a day-to-day basis of increasing our NAD levels. We're down-regulating our mTOR at certain times. We've got AMP kinase going up, hopefully at other times, so we're regulating that. We're getting rid of old senescent cells, and then we're going to stay biologically younger for much longer. Now, TMG, this is a new product that you've just brought out, trimethylglycine. Mm-hmm. Now, methylation is a really important process, and can you explain what TMG does and why it works in synergy with NMN?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So basically, first of all, methylation is a natural bodily process in which 3 hydrogen atoms and 1 carbon atom are transferred from one molecule to another. And this process is vital for many of our body's most important functions, such as creating neurotransmitters, cell division, energy production, metabolism. It plays a role in epigenetics. It's fighting free radicals and so on. So a very important process. And the reason why I brought this product to the market is because I was looking at different supplements and I was thinking, okay, so what would be the supplement that would complement NMN the most and that I would get the most benefits from? So, for example, there are a lot of people that are taking resveratrol as well, which is a good supplement to take. But also oleic acid from olive oil. It actually does the same work of activating sirtuin-1, just like resveratrol. So I can take my NMN with olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, and then I do increase the efficiency of the NMN. So I was thinking, okay, but what can't be substituted with something else? And so TMG, or trimethylglycine, it's a glycine molecule, and it has 3 methyl groups on it, and this makes it a methyl donor. Now, when we consume NMN, so the first N in NMN stands for nicotinamide, and when we consume the NMN, the nicotinamide is metabolized and is secreted by urine. Now, in order for this process to take place, the nicotinamide needs a methyl group to be attached to it. And this is where the TMG comes in, because TMG basically gives you these groups, and then it makes the metabolism of NMN most efficient. So another thing is that when your methylation levels are optimal, you make sure that you also keep your homocysteine levels at bay. So you don't want your homocysteine rising, which is correlated with cardiovascular disease. So basically TMG, it actually has quite a few clinical trials behind it. So there is 9 human clinical trials showing that TMG actually successfully lowers homocysteine levels. It's very successful in it because it's a very rich methyl donor, because every glycine molecule has 3 methyl groups attached to it. So it's compensating very well for this. And then it does make your NMN efficiency even better. And this way they do work in synergy to produce the best result. Now, not only this, but there have been trials showing that TMG also can enhance, athletic performance. And there are a couple of trials that are showing just borderline results, but very interesting that I've heard from one of our customers, is that actually he's been taking NMN for a few months, and then he's been feeling very good on it. And then he added the TMG and he noticed, so he's, I think, 51, 53, something like that. And he noticed that it was much easier to preserve and gain muscle in the gym. And basically basically they do have the synergistic effect as well. And actually, NMN did have 2 human clinical trials coming out in 2021 showing both that NMN protects again age-related muscle loss, and secondly it also increases endurance, cardiovascular fitness, and aerobic capacity. And what I've seen so far from from anecdotal evidence from my customers is that if you're also taking the TMG, you boost this effect even more. And I think it's because that it just maximizes the effect of NMN. And this is why I decided to launch TMG next, because I think that it also has like a very nice safety profile as well, just like NMN. And the reason why I launched NMN as the first product for the company is because it has an excellent safety profile. It's safe at very, very high dosages. There's been clinical trials showing that it's safe for up to 1.2 grams a day in humans. And also, if you see the dosages that in my studies, if you basically transfer this dosages into humans, this would be equivalent of, let's say, up to 10 grams per day for a human. This is very, very optimistic, because you still don't get any side effects basically in this human clinical trials. And same with TMG, because there's been human clinical trials with TMG with up to 20 grams a day, and you don't need that much. So what I've been recommending, for example, if you take 500 mg of NMN, you can do a 1:2 ratio or 1:3 ratio, meaning that for every 500 mg of NMN, you would take 1 gram or 1.2 grams of TMG. But as I said, there's been clinical trials with up to 20 grams of TMG, which it still shows that, it's so you can't, it doesn't have any side effects. So the threshold is much, much higher. And this is very, very good always for a compound.
Yeah, but this is important because, when I've studied the methylation process, which is very bloody complicated, but you can over-methylate, so this depends a little bit too on your genetics, doesn't it? With your your SHMT1, your MTR, your MTHFR, your all of those 5-6 genes that are really important in that methylation process. So is it dependent on that? Because with the work that I do with the DNA testing and so on, I'm very particular about what I put people on according to their genetics. It's like folinic acid versus folic acid, or sublingual B12 versus normal B12, or those types of things. So in my mind, I was asking myself, well, then if I'm giving TMG, that's sort of like the end product of the methylation process. So is there a genetic factor that you should be aware of, or can you over-methylate somebody in this fashion? That was just a question that was going on. Like in the homocysteine, which, like I'm fighting a battle of homocysteine with my mum because of the medications that she's on. Is it a good idea to put TMG into the mix there? And that's a bit of a specific question, and obviously not medical advice, but is optimizing her methylation, in other words, going to be a good thing if you're struggling with homocysteine? Because homocysteine is one of the signs, if you've got high homocysteine, of cardiovascular disease and lots of things that aren't great. So and lots of us are struggling with homocysteine without knowing it.
Yeah. So it definitely has to do with your genetic background, and you can do this test and see different gene variants. Like, for example, the MTHFR gene is pretty important to check for methylation and homocysteine and so on. And then of course you can do a simple blood test as well. So for example, if you live somewhere where genetic testing is not very available, you can just do a simple blood test and see your homocysteine levels and see where it is. You can't, it's very hard to hypermethylate. As I said, I think the threshold is much higher there, so it's not it's not something to be concerned about. If anything, there is something else that is that you can keep in mind when taking TMG, is that TMG is basically an osmoregulator. It means that it regulates the osmotic balance of the cell, just like creatine does, for example. So if you do take a lot of TMG, but again, this threshold is like very, very high, let's say after 20 grams of TMG a day, it might have a laxative effect. So this is something to be aware of. But other than that, it's pretty, it's a pretty mild kind of compound. It's a natural compound. You can find it in beets. This is why it's also called betaine. This is like the first name. It was isolated from beets, and it was the first one that was the first time it was isolated. It was isolated in beets, and it was called betaine, but it's actually trimethylglycine. So
because I understood like betaine to be more on the lines of the stomach acid, like your hydrochloric acid that's in your stomach. Is that completely off beam?
I think this is something different.
Betaine and pepsin, the combination that you have to take for an increase in your stomach acidity. But I might be completely off beam there. Okay, so it's going to optimize your methylation as well. So this is going to help with detox.
Exactly. So it's going to optimize your methylation. It's going to make your neurotransmitter production more efficient as well, and it's going to give this necessary methyl groups for the NMN to be metabolized in the most efficient way. So there are actually multiple benefits, and it's going to make sure that your homocysteine doesn't rise, and this means that it's cardioprotective. There's been a couple of studies showing some minor results for lipid metabolism in the liver as well. So this is also there. So it's a very, very good compound to take for sure. And that's the reason why, we thought to launch it next along with NMN, because I think that, if you do have this combination of NMN plus extra virgin olive oil plus TMG, you actually are getting a very nice, anti-aging foundation already. And, as I previously started talking about the NMN clinical trials in 2021. So, for example, another clinical trial that has been done in pre-diabetic women with NMN, where the women were obese or overweight and postmenopausal, and they had all the symptoms of pre-diabetes and so on. And we've seen that after only 10 weeks of supplementation with NMN, and actually at quite a low dosage at 250 mg, they managed to become more insulin sensitive. And this is amazing news, because it's not a drug, it's just a natural compound, and this is what it can do in a clinical trial. And also, interestingly, in the same trial, they have some really interesting data that NMN actually managed to activate the collagen production pathway as well. In this human. So this is very, very cool.
Is that why your skin is so amazing?
For sure.
Wow. Okay. So it helped with the collagen production as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
and it does. And this is very interesting because, there are so many collagen supplements on the market, but not all of them are efficient. And actually not all of them are being absorbed properly, because when you do take collagen orally, it may, it basically is broken down into amino acids in your digestive system. And then those amino acids may or may not be used to produce more collagen. So it's actually not the most efficient way to boost your collagen. But if you're taking the NMN, it does boost the collagen production pathway, and then you have a really nice effect on your skin as well.
Yeah, and you're proof of that. You're definitely proof of that.
And I think that it's very interesting, because both of these symptoms, so basically the insulin resistance and a decrease in collagen production, they're both symptoms of aging. So they're both being seen in people over 30 when the aging process already has taken place, and we're seeing this hallmarks of aging.
Yeah. And so insulin sensitivity, for those who don't understand how important, because I think people they don't understand what insulin does, but insulin is, you can explain it better. It helps the sugar get into the cell, or the glucose to get into the cell. But over time, when we have a high sugar diet, for example, we're going to have insulin resistance coming in. And that means we're not able to take the glucose up into the cell, and it flows freely around the body, and then it can glycate different proteins and cause things like atherosclerosis. And it's a gateway drug, basically, or the gateway problem to all of the big killers. So it's really important that we sensitize our body. And there's the fasting as again, in that whole AMPK, mTOR argument. We want to keep our bodies insulin sensitive. This is what, when we're 20, we can get away with eating really badly and still stay lean, right? And then when we hit like 40 odd, we start to have problems with carbs, because we become more and more carb intolerant, and i.e. we become more and more insulin resistant. And we can reverse that by a combination of supplements and diet and exercise. Obviously increases your insulin sensitivity. And these are all things that are going to slow down the aging process, slow down you getting neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes.
It's actually pretty horrible, and you have a very good point here, that it's indeed like it's probably, if I could give like one simple advice to someone that doesn't know any science, so instead of going into complicated terms and things like that, I would just say, you know what, just ditch carbs, excess carbs. Like you don't have to understand why, just do it.
It's bloody hard, isn't it? It is a hard thing to ask people to do. But.
Yeah, of course, it's very addictive. It's actually, it's like it's more addictive than cocaine or something. And it's very, very sad, because 80% of adults in the Western world might be pre-diabetic at the moment. And if you look around, like you indeed have people that are craving desserts every day, and they're having desserts every day. And this is like so far from normal, but it's the new norm, and everyone does it, and sugar is everywhere. It's really, really bad. And, it's actually horrible, because then you indeed have, all of this, the glycation that you mentioned, you have this molecules floating around it, being attached to other proteins, and, you have horrible
wreaking havoc. Atherosclerosis and all those sorts of horrible things, and things that happen when you get diabetes, or and if you just need to look around at the state of our population to know that there's something wrong with our food supply, and it is hugely addictive. I mean, all of us will struggle, and the more carbs you have, the more you want. It's a constant battle, for most of us. And the less sugar you have, the less you want it. But that initial. So, I mean, you're the second doctor to come on in the last 2 weeks and said, if you forget everything else that I've said today, excess carbs is at the basis of everything. It's the base problem.
That's very interesting. That's really nice to hear that other people are talking about it, because honestly, I think that we don't talk about this enough. That's the real pandemic. You know what I mean? And, it's very important that we inform more and more people about this. And actually, I also, I'm trying to do this myself, obviously, like not with 100% success rate.
Me neither. I have moments of weakness where
most days, I'm trying to stick into like a keto/carnivore diet, because this is what feels good for me. I've been experimenting with different diets before. I've been vegan for some time, and it was good at first, because what happens when you go vegan is like you start detoxing a lot, because you don't have all the processed meat and everything, so you start feeling well, but actually you do get severe amino acid depletion after some time. So like it can only last for so long. If you want to take care of your body properly, you actually like can't be vegan. Like this is the conclusion that I came to myself as a scientist, and also after having my experiment of N=1, I realized that this is not the way to go. And I'm doing my blood tests regularly, once or twice a year, to make sure that everything is
tracking,
everything where it needs to be, and things like that. that. And, like I feel much better and I perform much better on a keto/carnivore diet. And I do this with intermittent fasting as well. So I'm going for like a 3-hour eating window most days, and some days I'm doing just 1 meal. You get used to it because, for example, last year when we were recording another interview, I was not able to do this, but now I was already narrowing down the eating window. So first it was like 8 hours eating window, then it was 6, then it was 4. So it's kind of dropping, and you get used to it eventually. So I've been trying to do intermittent fasting for about, I don't know, maybe 2+ years now. So after 2+ years, I'm now comfortable with not eating most of the time.
And it's great. And I find there's a couple of hacks, because you don't need to be a Puritan about this, but what you want to do is not spike your glucose in the morning. So things that I do is like have exogenous ketones in the morning as a drink with my NMN and my resveratrol and my olive oil. And see, olive oil I have in the morning, even though that is a calorie, it is a fat, it doesn't spike my insulin and therefore my blood sugars. So for me, that I'm still in a fasted state, even though I've had what you can call a food, but and then you can have things like a little bit of black coffee. I have a little bit of prebiotic fiber. These things help me stay fuller through to lunchtime. And for me, I'm usually, I usually have a late-ish lunch and dinner as well. So it's usually 2. And if I'm really being bad, then I'll end up with 3 times a day. But, it's narrowing that down so that at least in the morning, I can overnight, and then in the morning it's easier for me. I find it's much more of a psychological struggle for me later on in the day. And I think as your willpower starts to wane and you're like, you've had a hard, stressful day, and like, say, where's the treats, And so we're all on this road of re-educating ourselves and don't go for perfection, just go for better. I think is a message as well, is don't have to be perfect, because when you go for perfect from straight out of the gate, you're probably going to go, wow, this is just wild, So
I think that there is a social aspect in it as well. So for example, if you're meeting friends in the evening for dinner and things like that, they're going to trick you into having something to eat,
having some wine,
you want yourself as well. So it is what it is, and you don't have to be perfect every day for sure. And even I deviate from my plans sometimes, but it's very rare, but it still happens sometimes. But I'm trying to make sure that I'm actually consistent with my overall longevity routine. So you previously mentioned that it's very important to have an overall routine with sauna and intermittent fasting and other things, and this is what I'm trying to do as well. So I do make sure that my nutrition is on point most of the days. I am taking my supplements, I'm going to the sauna. I have a beautiful sauna in the building. So and it's always empty, by the way. It's very, very rare that there are people.
Well, you're in Dubai, so I mean, like, it's hot. You just have to walk outside and you're in a sauna.
Honestly, people are mostly, in air-conditioned spaces all day long, to be honest, here. So, I rarely go outside during the, during the day. But I make sure that I do my sauna, like 3-4 times a week, even, I'm striving for, to go 6 times a week, let's say, but, it's hard because,
it is.
Life happens. So, but 3-4 times a week is doable. And then, you do, it's basically sauna is, can be considered as an alternative, as a substitute to exercise, because it does have the same effect, right? So we do have the increased heart rate, and you're sweating. So your body actually thinks that, you're exercising, and this is an external stress, and this is what we call hormesis as well. So this is something that also activates, the sirtuins. So I'm doing the sauna as well, and I'm trying to do some cardio as well, a couple of times a week, or even more, or like 3, 4, 5 times a week, depending on the week. obviously I work a lot, so you know
it's pretty intense.
But but it does help that, you know, I do have a nice gym in the building, and that I'm doing the sauna there as well, and I can do my cardio there too. So I just need to take the lift and go downstairs. So
you're lucky. Yeah, and it's about optimizing your routine and finding out what works for you and adding in these pieces of the puzzle. Elena, you've been really marvelous today. Thank you so much for all these insights. I'm really excited about having TMG now in the mix, and people can order that on my website at nmbio.nz along with the NMN. We are struggling a little bit occasionally with COVID and delays in the shipping, but bear with us, people, while we keep this growing and keep this company growing pains. And it's a beautiful combination to be taking. And I'm really excited for the longevity field. And I'm also really excited for the other stuff that you're working on. So watch the space, because there will be more coming. It's pretty cool.
A lot of very interesting things and projects going on. You know, NMN Bio as a company has grown so much over the past year. It's actually crazy.
Huge.
It's expanding rapidly. You know, we now have, you know, our warehouse in the UK. We also do Amazon FBA in the UK. We do have another warehouse in Europe as well. And now we're expanding to the US as well. And of course, we have you in New Zealand. So, you know,
and Australia.
Everywhere, and hopefully in the Middle East as well very soon. I'm working on this too, and I actually might be having some exciting news coming soon. And you know, with regards to the longevity field, I think that it's very important to for people to understand that there is no such thing as the fountain of youth. So there is no one supplement that you're going to take that is going to do everything for you. And you know, like, this might sound ironic because it's coming from me, and I am selling supplements, and I have an anti-aging supplement company because it's very good supplements, but at the same time I make sure that I actually, you know, implement all of the other stuff as well. So I'm going to my gym, I'm doing my sauna, I'm eating clean, you know, keto/carnivore most days, intermittent fasting and so on. And actually all of this information I've put together in an online course.
Thank you.
I'm going through, you know, all of these things. We have 5 modules, and it's actually a joint work with my co-instructor, Jesse Coomer, who is a breath worker. And actually, you should get him to the podcast as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. I love watching his videos. He's a character.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he is. He's a really cool person to work with. You know, we're friends as well, and we launched together the Foundations of Longevity online course. So this is an on-demand course, and it has 5 modules over 2 hours of content, where we're going through you know, a lot of the things that we mentioned today. So different lifestyle interventions, supplementation. I'm even talking about AMPK and mTOR cycling, for example. I'm diving deep into nutrition. I'm diving deep into supplements, and you know, like all kinds of supplements that I'm taking personally as well. So, you know, we mentioned a couple of them, for example, quercetin, and then, you know, berberine and things like that. And I also take beef liver as well.
Oh, wow. Beef liver.
Yeah. I
haven't heard that one.
Either a New Zealand or an Australian company. I think they're actually pretty awesome. And yeah, it's called Ancestral Supplements. I don't have an affiliation with them, but it's just a very nice product that I'm using myself. Yeah, so we do have all of this information in one place, because what I've seen is that people are interested in longevity, and people are interested in what can they do in order to maintain themselves healthier for longer. Absolutely. And sometimes, you know, there is so much information online that it's actually very hard to put together useful information, because there's a lot of junk out there as well. So this is what we did with Jesse, and we organize this course, and we have this wonderful curriculum put together. It's an on-demand course, so you just, you know, like,
and I will put the link in the show notes. So go to the show notes, people, and it will also be up on my website, the link shortly. And it's really, I think, you know, educating yourself around these topics is just gold. And we've touched on a lot of things today, but if you want to do a deeper dive, like the cycling stuff, that's really interesting, you know, so that you're not going completely one way or completely the other way, is really, really important. So I'm excited for that course as well. And you just keep bringing out great content, and you've got a brain the size of, I don't know what, it's so big. It would be nice to be it's super intelligent, but you bring it across very well. I think between the two of us, we bring it across relatively well, because it is very, complicated stuff. But I think if you take away a few things from today, cut the carbs, go in the sauna, do your exercise, take your enamine, take your TMG, take your quercetin, your fisetin, your resveratrol, perhaps your olive oil. These are things that you can practically do. Optimize your sleep, people. Sleep is just the number one leverage point.
That's the other very important point. And I do also talk about this in the course too, but your biorhythms are so important.
So important.
It's actually, like, I've seen it's important for longevity and anti-aging as well, because when your biorhythms are disrupted, your circadian rhythms are disrupted, then your melatonin production is disrupted overnight. And if your melatonin is disrupted, then you will have less defense against reactive oxygen species. And then there is another, like a plethora of processes that melatonin is also implicated in. And then you don't have all these benefits, and then you're basically aging faster. So very, very important as well. A very good point. Takeaway message from today's podcast: make sure that you go to sleep early, everyone.
And go every night at the same time, and then get up in the morning, get some sunlight on your eyes, and do all that sort of good stuff. Elena, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely awesome, and I'll put all of those links in the show notes, and head on over to enaminebio.nz if you're listening to this, guys, and grab your supplements over there. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Elena.
Thank you. Bye-bye.